Welcome to the U.S. Manufacturing Today podcast, your hub of information about the U.S. manufacturing and distribution industry. Brought to you by Variable, the on-demand labor solution revitalizing and optimizing your operation, enabling just-in-time response to demand, more efficient production, and lower cost per unit. And now your host and head of reindustrialization at Variable, Matt Harine.
Welcome back to U.S. Manufacturing Today, the podcast powered by Variable, where we talk with the leaders, innovators, and change makers shaping the future of American industry, along with providing regular updates on the state of the industry, the changing landscape, policies, and more. Today, we're unpacking a pivotal moment in U.S. trade policy, global negotiations, and the signals that U.S. manufacturers can't afford to miss. We're now in week 24 of the Trump 2.0 administration, and the stakes just keep rising. As we inch closer to the critical July trade deadlines, there's a lot happening beneath the surface. Negotiations with the European Union, Canada, Mexico, and other key Asian partners are heating up, while manufacturers across the country brace for potential tariff escalations, supply chain shifts, and rapid policy turns. But beyond the negotiation rooms, we're seeing some fascinating and telling economic signals. Let's start with tariffs. U.S. tariff revenue hit an all-time high in May of 2025, around $22.3 billion. That follows $16.5 billion in April, bringing the year-to-date total to more than $67 billion in new tariff collections. Think about that. The federal government is now pulling in record revenue from tariffs. This isn't a symbolic policy lever anymore. It's become a substantial funding source. And at the same time, the U.S. trade deficit saw its largest monthly decline on record in April, down by $74.7 billion to a deficit of just $87.6 billion, a substantial decrease. That's a huge swing. Whether you love tariffs or hate them, the data shows they're actively reshaping trade flows. And here's another critical piece. China's manufacturing PMI fell by 2.1 points in May. That's not just a number, it's a signal that China's manufacturing sector is cooling off, and these trade wars may actually be having an impact on some of our partners. Even more telling is that container shipping traffic from China has now dropped to its lowest level since February, right after Chinese New Year, which is the historical time where that tends to drop off. We're seeing a real-time slowdown in the movement of goods out of China, and so the global trade landscape is changing, and it's changing fast. Just announced today, President Trump revealed a new trade pact with Vietnam ahead of the July 9th deadline. The U.S. will drop the previously announced 46% reciprocal tariff and instead impose a 20% tariff on Vietnamese imports, along with a 40% tariff on goods transshipped through Vietnam from other countries. In return, Vietnam agrees to open its market, allowing U.S. exports to enter duty-free. That's a huge win. It's been a historical challenge in places like Vietnam to get American products access to the market, and it has alleviated concerns with a lot of U.S.-based manufacturers who source material from Vietnam, especially in the furniture industry. But why it matters? It does clear the uncertainty. This agreement replaces the severe 46% levy that was paused, but set to be reinstated in July, and it cracks down on transshipment abuses. The steep 40% tariff aims to deter China from routing goods through Vietnam to evade U.S. duties, which is becoming a common practice. And it boosts U.S. market access. While imports face higher duties, American exporters gain cost-free entry into Vietnam, signaling a strategic move toward reciprocal trade balances. This deal is more than just tariffs, it's a strategic step in the broader effort to rebalance trade with Southeast Asia, clamp down on tariff avoidance, and reinforce incentives for onshoring and domestic competitiveness. Meanwhile, the Senate just passed its version of the Big Beautiful Bill, a sweeping trade and revenue package. One piece is flying under the radar, a proposed tax on remittances, and this is a critical component of the bill. Right now, remittances, the money sent abroad by people working in the U.S. who are non-citizens, they are not taxed. But the House version of the bill had originally proposed a 5% remittance tax, and the Senate is pushing for 1%. There are growing calls to raise this rate. Why does this matter for manufacturers? First, the revenue. It's a potential new funding stream for the Treasury at a time when the federal government is looking for ways to pay for infrastructure, defense, and yes, reshoring incentives. But second, and maybe more importantly, it addresses a quiet but significant offshoring of capital. Every dollar sent abroad is a dollar that isn't circulating in the American economy, supporting small businesses, or driving domestic investment. A remittance tax doesn't stop legal immigration, but it does create a stronger incentive for wages earned here to stay here. That fuels Main Street, and it doesn't flow out of the country. And that brings me to another issue that deserves some attention: the overuse of H-2B visas in manufacturing. The H-2B visa program, designed for temporary, non-agricultural workers, was never intended to become a long-term labor pipeline for industrial employers. Yet, in some regions and sectors, that's exactly what's happening. For instance, I saw something on X this week about companies posting for welders at $18 an hour. There's a common refrain about there being a labor shortage and shortage of welders and skilled trades. But when you post for work that's at $18 an hour for these types of skilled trades, wages are driven down across the board. And instead of investing in local workforce development, skills training, or on-demand labor solutions, some manufacturers just rely heavily on these temporary visas to fill the roles, sometimes out of seasonal work. And while that might seem like a quick fix for labor shortages, it comes with severe consequences. It depresses wage growth, it limits incentives to modernize operations, and it increases the outflow of earned wages through remittances, capital that could otherwise be reinvested here at home. If we're serious about reshoring and reindustrialization, we need to be just as serious about building a resilient domestic workforce, one that includes upskilled workers, flexible labor models, and real economic participation for American families. And while all this unfolds at the policy level, real dollars are hitting the ground. GE's $490 million investment into U.S. manufacturing footprint is a prime example. It's not just a capital play, it's a bet on the future of domestic production. Investments like this have a ripple effect, especially for Tier 2 and Tier 3 suppliers, smaller manufacturers, and the broader supply ecosystem. When big players commit to building here, the supply chain must follow. It's a strong signal that reshoring isn't just rhetoric anymore, it's actually happening. But here's the critical point. None of this guarantees stability. The July deadlines could bring new tariffs, the big beautiful bill could pass with surprise provisions through reconciliation, and global shipping patterns could shift again, and the labor market is still tight. This is where operational flexibility becomes a superpower. On-demand labor, local sourcing, and the ability to quickly ramp production up or down, they aren't just nice-to-haves anymore, they're survival tools in today's market. Manufacturers that can pivot quickly, control their supply chains, and tap into variable capacity will be the ones who thrive. So, as we head into July, keep your eye on a few things. Trade negotiations and that deadline, and whether those deadlines get extended or enforced in different ways. The final version of the big beautiful bill, which is set to pass here in the next week or so, but especially some type of reconciliation and future steps on that remittance tax and visa reform. China's shipping and production activity, and domestic investment signals like GE's, and who follows their lead, which next tier of suppliers follows at the lead. And a quick update on some of our previous issues and episodes. Just this past week, the Secretary of Transportation announced an enforcement of an executive order for non-domiciled CDLs and English-speaking CDL drivers to be enforced on our roadways. It continues to play out. We've seen crashes all over the United States. We previously had Shannon Everett on in a prior episode with American Truckers United. Their advocacy has been critical in getting this passed and enforced. And last week, we talked about investment casting with Maren Muxlow and a couple of other episodes. So if you haven't had the chance to check those out, please feel free to go to our site. We're in a moment where reindustrialization isn't just policy, it's a movement, but movements favor those that are prepared. Stay agile and stay local and stay informed. That's it for today's episode of U.S. Manufacturing Today. And to stay ahead of the curve and to help plan your strategy, please check out our website at variableops.com and under the resources section titled Trump 2.0, where you can see the framework around upcoming policies and how they will impact you. If you're on socials, give us a follow on LinkedIn, X, or Instagram. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please feel free to follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, and leave us a rating, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you again for joining us and learning more about how you can make your way.